from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today's subject involves economic growth and jobs. That's a very important topic throughout the United States today. When you do polls, it indicates that that's probably the number one concern on Americans' minds. Approximately 3 years ago on this program, we had as our guest a gentleman who's returned today, and it was with an experiment that the business community in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Kootenai County was undertaken at that time to try to recruit certain businesses to our part of the United States. And we questioned at the time that experiment, how it would go, and with our guest, and he is back to talk about the success of what is known as Jobs Plus. We also want to do this program because for our viewers in Canada and other parts of the Northwest, it's, I'm sure, of great interest to you to know how this experiment came about and what the conclusion has been up until this point. I welcome to the program Bob Potter, who is the president of Jobs Plus.
Thanks.
Prior to that, he was the regional vice president for sales at AT&T, so he has many years' experience as an executive. Bob, welcome to the program, and thank you for returning and being generous with your time.
Good being with you. Enjoy it.
As always, I'm very happy to have with us Steve Shank, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development, as a member of our panel, and I shall ask Steve Shank to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. Bob, you and Jobs Plus have some real history now. I don't want to belabor that many years of experience age thing too much.
That's all right.
You've been around for a while and have quite a track record. I think it might be worthwhile if you'd take us back a little bit and talk about the early days, the formation of Jobs Plus, and give us an idea how the whole effort got started.
Sure. First of all, it's rather an unusual experiment at the time because the community did almost 300 plus share owners. The community raised $1 million back about almost 5 years ago. Key people, key companies in the community put in a significant amount of money, and individuals. And the whole idea was to raise some money to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and to do something. Now, if you go back 5 years ago here, things were not like they are today. We were into some coming out of the high interest rate era. Things were not really well in Spokane. And so I think it's a credit to this community that they did something in a nonprofit way and not have to lean on the government to do something. And they formed this thing called Jobs Plus, and it's very interesting in that just a few months later, the Momentum program was formed, a very similar approach. The idea was to add to the employment base. We didn't have a strategy at the time. I wasn't here when they raised the money. I had bought a home here and left AT&T. Then I was asked if I would run the program after they did some recruiting to find out an individual that they might like to hire. And I think you might have been involved in those early days of that process. But I accepted the role, and I put together a rather simple strategy. I felt if we were going to add jobs, we probably ought to, the key thing would be to diversify the economy. And so the strategy is very simple. Recruit at the beginning small and medium-sized companies that operate in a high-cost area, that are not location dependent. In other words, they manufacture a product or provide a service on a national scale so that they could operate any place. That hopefully, in the early days, this was tough, successful companies, because we sure didn't have money for startup ventures, and we didn't want companies that wouldn't last. And I wanted companies that paid a decent salary and had decent fringe benefits, because our young people here and our old people, older workers, need that. And so basically that was our strategy. We recruited small and medium-sized companies because the sales cycle would be shorter. And I was a little naive in this whole thing of economic development, because I didn't realize how long a sales cycle, even to recruit a small company. Our first one is U.S. Products, that's out at the Hayden Lake Airport. That was almost a 3-year venture from beginning to end on U.S. Products. And so what you're involved in is a long sales cycle. And if you were trying to recruit an IBM or an AT&T like we were talking about a few minutes ago, take you 3 years to find the decision maker. And so that strategy of small and medium worked out well. Backfires in a sense in that many of those companies are family owned, and those middle management jobs, you don't create enough middle management jobs. You create investment and you create employment. But we need a company like we've just obtained, we just closed on Harpers, that gives us a wide variety of middle management jobs. So basically that's the strategy. Now, we started with 0 leads. We started with a very weak Department of Commerce back in those days too. About the same time we formed Jobs Plus, Governor Andrus stepped up to the plate, hired Jim Hawkins, and put together what I call a small but hard-hitting professional Department of Commerce, and developed some advertising programs and some strategies, marketing strategies, where we now get some leads from that. And so that all happened about the same time. And the other day we just closed our 32nd company. So in the days when I was here before, I was a downer because generating leads and finding companies to relocate, it isn't all that easy.
Bob, I want to make sure I don't take credit where it isn't due. 5 years ago, I was heavily involved in the Chamber and was certainly aware of the Jobs Plus effort, but I wasn't actively involved in it, which leads me back to some of my history questions. Could you take just a minute more and tell us a little bit more about the structure of that early effort?
Sure.
The board involvement, the staff that you gathered, those sorts of things.
Well, the first thing I felt we should do is keep our costs contained. $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but it has to be spread out over a 4-year period. And remember, we had no brochures, we had really nothing. And so Katie Brody and I just formed it, and we keep our costs low. We spend most of our money on marketing with clients, client sales activity directly with the client. We've used very, very little advertising. We use no direct mail. Early days, we did a lot of telemarketing. That's plain old hard work. But we got some volunteers to come over. Some of the young people from the college came over. In fact, that's how we got Harpers, was a telemarketing sales call from my office with a volunteer, and we got through and talked to Joe Wisniewski, the president. And so we kept our costs down. Our board has been super in giving us the freedom to operate. One of the problems that I've observed in this thing of recruiting companies, a lot of organizations get infected with what I call hidden agendas. And this pops up around the country, and you hear clients talk about it that are being recruited. Hidden agendas like on their board is the developer, the builder, the hidden agendas of people, how they want that company steered and manipulated. We have been free to do what we want without any hidden agendas, and my board never interferes with that. They have been very good about it.
How many members on that board, Bob, and are they essentially the same group?
Pretty much the same group. Pretty large board, but it has been a very good board. We have, I report to them monthly on our activities and what our strategies and tactics and where we are, what's going on. But I don't think I've ever had them tell me how to manage a client.
You have a wealth of experience in corporations and in management, and you've taken on a new dimension here. Although you were in sales with AT&T, you've had to sell in a very different way. You've had to sell this community and the workers here, and
well, the truth is, Tony, it's really it's just like when I sold at AT&T. Mm-hmm. It's like selling complex systems. Is really what it is. It's a long-term project, and you've got to manage you have to manage the client from beginning to end. Deep involvement. It's a differentiated sales strategy, and it's just like they do at IBM or AT&T, really. It's just marketing.
Yeah. And also, you, I'm sure, had to become aware of some of your competitors, because the companies you've been successful in bringing here, other communities were after them too. And so,
a couple of them, Harpers as an example, was recruited by 18 states. Another company that we closed, we haven't announced yet, been recruited by about 15 states. And it's a thrill when you compete against some real professionals in this thing with high-powered budgets, when you can win a quality company.
A moment ago on the program, you indicated the real success, and I know when I had you on the program at the beginning, you were very excited about this.
Well, I was hoping the strategy was going to work.
Yes, I know. We were talking about will it work and so forth, and it certainly did. Would you take our viewers through that success? I know we can't go through every single one of them, but you've indicated over 30 companies have come here. Would you give us some examples of the different diversity that's
Yes.
coming and the type of the number of employees?
Originally, I was criticized by experts in this thing, and I'm not an economic development person. I don't treat this as an economic development job. I treat it as a marketing sales job, and that's all it is. We don't write grants, and we don't do PAC business, and things are out at Deffenbaugh's organization, and just focus directly on selling. That's the only focus we have. And the key to that, I was criticized for not focusing on certain industry segments. But it seemed to me, if my strategy was to recruit small, medium-sized companies that are not location dependent, that manufacture a product and sell it on a national scale, I didn't have to focus on a special industry, like something that might relate to mining or forest products. I felt, that doesn't diversify the economy. And so we just recruited any company that we got in our little directory and recruited companies that looked like that. And we wanted companies that obviously would fit in, but I didn't worry about what industry they were in. So we've got U.S. products with rug, wall cleaning machinery sold all around the world now, very successful. McAllister Technical Services is one. They manufacture scientific instruments. Plastic Model Engineering, they do mold making and high-tech mold making and injection molding. Cabletron Systems has their sales center here and their telemarketing center, distribution center, local area networks. Bendigo Swimsuits, we have a company that manufactures electric wheelchairs. Fabrication company. Another one that builds thermal towers, selling them all over the world now. It's all over the place. It's amazing that how diversified our strategy has worked. It surprised me.
And approximately how many employees, counting with the latest with Harpers, come
Well,
aboard?
it's fun to put Harpers in the picture because that took us up full 600. But with Harpers, we're at about 1,800 jobs created. Now remember, Harpers, we start construction in November. Mm-hmm. And so the employment starts July of '94. We got to build a 500,000 square foot building. So we've created about 1,800 jobs. Now these are direct jobs. We don't use this formula where one job creates this and that. We just count the jobs of the people that we've recruited that they've hired. And roughly the capital investment of the companies we've recruited is very close to about $90 million. Almost $100 million in capital investment. Harpers, of course, will be a big chunk because that's about $25 million.
Thank you. Steve Shank.
Bob, I keep going back, but that's interesting to me for some reason. In the early days when you were scrambling for leads,
Mm-hmm.
where'd you look? How did you,
well, we
you
just
told
had
us what you were looking for, but where'd you look for?
I got some directories that gave me the name of the company, the president's name, the size of the company, their sales volume, and what they did, and a phone number. And I knew the president's name, so we'd get on the phone and call the president, see if we could get through the secretary. I really learned to, I shouldn't say hate, I really had trouble with these high-powered secretaries that defend their boss. And I used to have one, so I understand it. But boy, to get through some of them was tough. But when it took you about 10 calls to get through and talk to a decision maker. Then you tell him why you called. Just as soon as possible, because telemarketing has such a bad name, of a sneaky approach. And so my approach was I just blurt out, I'm Bob Potter, President of Economic Development Corporation. I didn't say Jobs Plus because it sounds like you're recruiting headhunter or something. And I tell them right away, I'm calling to talk to you about recruiting you to move your company to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or to Kootenai County, Idaho.
When you finally got through to the head man or woman, what was the response
well,
that you
got? Well, and they'd say, you mean you called me and you think I'll talk about this over the phone? I said, well, yeah, this is the introduction to the idea, and then I'd explain our strategy and what we want to do. We're very business case oriented, if you recall. We do a business case study on every company. We compare California, Idaho, Colorado, anywhere. Sometimes they'll give us 15 states that they're looking at, that we have to do a cost comparison study. That's the first thing we try to do. And that opens the door, and now you've got a document that quantifies it in front of him. Because or her. Quality of life doesn't sell.
What is the clincher?
The cost, the being able to make a company a better producer in their industry is the key. And the sad thing about California is, and I will definitely say this and with all authority, you cannot manufacture a product in California today, a manufacturing environment, and be a low-cost producer in your industry with all of the bureaucracy and trouble there and the high cost of workman's comp. You cannot be competitive. And so you put something and quantify it in front of them. And that, when you can improve a company's bottom line by 25%, which is what we average, you'll get their attention.
So the quality of life that we are justifiably proud of in North Idaho is that's frosting on the cake.
At that stage, it's frosting on the cake. Now, it didn't help us in the case of Harpers until the end, in that the president of Harpers was very interested in having about 70 people relocate with the company. And they were looking at Utah, Oregon, and New Mexico in the finals. And Joe Wisniewski, the general manager of Harpers, felt that we were the low-cost producer by a very narrow margin. But he felt that his people that he wanted to relocate would find it more attractive to relocate here. And the fact that we have our universities, we looked at Spokane and Coeur d'Alene as a unit, by the way. And so our university support system over there, NIC here, Spokane Community College, all of those things added to our value. We're pretty powerful when you bring Spokane and Coeur d'Alene or Kootenai County together.
If I can squeeze in one more question, Tony. What makes Idaho such an attractive place in terms of dollars? What makes us the low-cost producer that beats out all these other
I think, first of all, and it's a credit to our state legislators, both parties, and a credit to our governor and previous administrations. Idaho's workman's comp rates, Idaho's basic business-oriented costs and taxes and things, when you compare them to the rest of the United States, they're very much in balance and very predictable. We usually always have a balanced budget in this state. Governor Andrus, if you notice, doesn't overrun his headlights. So we're a well-managed state from a financial, fiscal point of view, very well managed. And when you look at some of the other states, they're out of control. And so our workman's comp alone is a big, significant item. At Harpers, that was very significant.
I want to tie into what Steve said, and I've heard this from others that have been involved with you on your recruiting, that along with what you just indicated, that also if you have within your local government structure a sensitivity to the infrastructure, isn't it true that businesses are looking for a certain kind of structure in education and the transportation and water and so forth?
Once again, what makes our strategy work? I wouldn't have been able to recruit Harpers if we weren't, and I know I'm not here to talk about Spokane, but if we were not next door to Spokane, we would not have been able to recruit Harpers. The vendor support system, the transportation hub. If I were over in Missoula, I'd have to have a different strategy. So when you look at Kootenai County and Spokane County, and you put them together, you have a very powerful unit when you look around the country.
I'd like to get into the success story of Harpers and let you identify for the viewers what they manufacture, and there's over 500 employees that's going to be coming on board.
It's going to be closer to 600.
It's close to 600. I know you've worked a long time on all of this, and it's happened, but what the viewers may not understand is that your work doesn't end then. Will you tell us that transition period, what the
That's
role
the trouble. Yeah, it is. It's the long sales cycle. First of all, we had to do about 4 different studies for Harpers. We responded to 2 or 3 different, I think 3 different requests for proposals. We were always close to Harpers because we were the one that initiated the first call, and Joe got to like us. And I was the first person to call on him. And so we established good rapport, and he's an outstanding man, and it was just fun. Harpers was fun, and I never thought, when I walked into the building, it's so huge, 600,000 square feet, 600 employees in this little town. 3 years ago in my strategy, I was intimidated. But stuck. Well, he was good enough to take me around the plant, good enough to listen to my story, good enough to take pieces of the studies. Originally, we just studied moving the chair manufacturing department. And so we just kept that up. And I bet I visited Harpers at least 15 times. He had never made it here yet. But he always kept us in the game. And as it started to expand, we were always given preferential treatment as to here's your competition. Now he didn't help us break it. We had to compete. His secretary, his staff assistant, came up to visit in the middle of all of this. And she fell in love with the area and called him back and said, I'm resigning, I'm going to stay here. I figured that ended the whole deal. And she was just with us. Her name is Diane Moore, very lovely lady. And we were all down at Harpers for about a week with their key employees about 3 weeks ago. And she was with us. Then the competition entered the field. Okay, and now it gets more intense and more intense. And you're always trying to stick in the game. And right in about that stage, Mr. Harper passed away. And we had to pull off. And Joe told us to pull off because the company was going to be restructured. Well, about 6 months later, I got a call from Joe Wisniewski, and he said Kimball International bought us. And that was a great thing because Kimball's a superb company. And so Harpers was a superb company, now owned by Kimball International, which is a superb Fortune 500 company. And he said, now it's on the full plate burner. We don't own this building anymore. The Harpers family owns it. We've got to have a new site. We've got to be operational July of '94. And you've got competition now in about 10 states. And so here are the ground rules. We responded to another study.
So you have to be ready for all those situations.
Well, it went on and on and on, just one problem-solving thing after another. And then the client started to visit and compare. And then once the deal is made, you become a loan executive because that was in our proposal. And so I'm almost full-time right now. Katie and I are almost full-time, along with Peter Kerwin over at Washington Water Power. We have to work with helping getting the permitting process going down in Boise, working with their engineers to kind of help break do a little groundbreaking for them. We have to work with the city of Post Falls. We had to be competitive on our proposal. So really our work really starts now.
We should indicate to our viewers who are not from this area that the plant will actually be located in the Post Falls area instead of here. And so
very large plant. It'll be the largest building. It's interesting. This will be the largest building in the industry northwest. It's a 500,000 square foot facility. It's larger than the Boeing move to Spokane, about twice that big. It's the largest company ever to relocate into the inland northwest. So a lot of firsts here.
There are other things. You've identified some things that you're doing almost full time now, but also management will be coming in and out as all this preparation is going on.
There'll be some up in a couple of weeks.
And so you have to host them and deal with those issues.
Well, we used to have to host them. Harpers stands alone. They're they're the kind of company that pays their own way now. Mm-hmm. We did host a lot, and I paid a lot of trips down there and that sort of thing. But once they made the deal, they say, hey, we're taking over now. You don't have to fund anything. And that's good because Jobs Plus, we're always the borderline of close to being broke. So we have to conserve our cash.
One final question in that area for you, and that is that working with the county and with the city and so forth, there's still a lot of details that will be worked out through the whole process that your organization will be involved in.
We've got a good 2 years worth of work we're here. They have no staff person here. So we're there'll be a public information meeting, by the way, on Harpers at Post Falls High School on the October 29th, starting around 7 p.m. And the Kimball executives and Harpers executives and Mayor Hammond and our permitting people from Boise, air quality people, environmental people will be there. It'll be a good presentation.
Steve Shank.
Bob, what do you, and I know you've heard this question before, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a second.
Sure.
What do you say to the person who believes that you've been too successful?
Well, it's a good question, and I worry about it too. If you recall, when I first took this job, I I don't know why I was worried about then with no leads, but I moved up here because I love this place, and I surely didn't. I don't want to overrun our headlights. But what people don't understand, and what I soon learned, and you know it, Tony, and you do too, because you see it here at the school, how many young people, like the little lady I was talking to, have no job opportunities here. A lot of low-pay jobs, no career paths associated with them. Our young people still have to leave here today, most often, to get a decent job. So people that have moved here, and I know I'll be hit for this statement, and I'm from California, but I liken some of these people that say things like that. They're the Californians that have moved up here that feel this is a country club for them, and let's not have anybody disturb that total North Idaho country club. Well, our young people and our displaced workers over in the Silver Valley need decent job opportunities, and they want to stay here. So the key is not to overrun your headlights, to recruit a quality company like Harpers that's environmentally sound, that has a tremendous financial stability, owned by a Fortune 500 company, that uses the word career path. That's what we need. We need more middle management job opportunities. We formed a thing called Kootenai Perspectives, and Frank Henderson and Mr. Griffith, former president or CEO of Hecla Mining Company, have put together a thing called Kootenai Perspectives. And that's part of Jobs Plus. And what we're trying to do is make sure the cities and the county start doing some decent planning, because I was never impressed with our situation related to comprehensive planning. Each city does their own. Each one is about 8 years behind the curve, and it doesn't come together right. And we need to focus on that. We need to have a comprehensive plan for this county and North Idaho that makes sense, so that we don't overrun our headlights. And then I need to recruit high quality. Now, in the beginning, when you have no leads, like any sales organization, you feel good to get a sale. Well, we are very, very protective now.
We're almost out of time. I want to interrupt us to add one point there, because we have lost a lot of jobs in the mining industry and in the lumber, and a lot of those won't return because of the economy. So in one way, you're replacing a lot of those jobs, and that won't be the level of growth that some people anticipate with it.
That's exactly right. We are replacing jobs. But the whole key to it is to recruit somebody that will provide our people with a career path opportunity that have decent benefits, so that our kids don't have to leave, and our older people.
I must interrupt to thank you, Bob Potter, the president of Jobs Plus, for being with us, and Steve Shank for your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you have found this program most informative, and this is an experiment, as we indicated, started 3 or 4 years ago, and you can hear and see the results from our guests today. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we will discuss what we believe to be a significant issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.